He hadn't touched a woman in 12 years. And now, the first one to fall into his arms was nearly broken. Nathan Hale didn't expect much from life anymore. He lived quietly, alone up in those dry Arizona hills, with nothing but the wind and the burden of memories he never spoke about. He had a cabin, a shotgun, and regrets older than the trees surrounding him. But that day, everything shifted. She came stumbling out of the tree line like death was chasing her heels, barefoot, filthy, barely wrapped in a scrap of white cloth that once was a curtain or maybe a dress. Her arms were scraped raw. Her lips were cracked. Her eyes, well, they looked like they had witnessed things no person should ever see. She collapsed right in front of him. No scream, no name, just two faint words as she clutched that dirty fabric to her chest. "Please don't." He froze. She wasn't bleeding much on the outside, but her body trembled like she had just crawled out of a burning house. He took a step forward. She flinched but didn't pull away. That's when the cloth slipped slightly, and what he saw twisted his stomach. Her back looked like someone had tried to carve her with fire and disgrace. Burns, welts, deep twisted scars, and marks that didn't belong on human skin. Symbols, letters, like someone had branded their name into her pain. Nathan staggered back. It wasn't the blood. It wasn't the injuries. It was the way she folded into herself, like she had learned how to disappear. And for a moment, all he could see was Tennessee. The war, the girl he couldn't save. The one who had looked at him with the same shattered stare. He had walked away once. He had sworn never again. He took off his coat, slow and steady, and draped it around her like a vow. No words, no questions, only action. Then he lifted her up and carried her away from whatever hell had spit her out. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt alive. He thought the worst had passed. He didn't know the real storm was only just arriving. The cabin was warm, but in those hills, the night air still had a bite. It wasn't freezing, but after what she had endured, even a summer breeze might have felt like ice on her skin. He laid her carefully on the old cot by the back wall. She didn't speak, didn't even attempt to cover herself more than she already was. Just curled into herself, gripping that coat he had wrapped around her like it was sewn from safety. Nathan didn't ask questions. He didn't want to scare her, and truthfully, he wouldn't have known where to begin. So he did what men like him do when words weigh too much. He built a small fire in the stove, not because it was cold, but because the crackling sound gave the place a heartbeat. She hardly moved. Her eyes swept across the cabin as though she expected someone to burst in at any moment. Every noise outside made her shiver. Even the wind brushing against the shutters seemed to rattle her bones. Nathan brewed coffee. It was bitter, strong, and older than he cared to admit, but it gave his hand something to occupy. He sat at the table watching the fire, sneaking glances at her now and then, still breathing, still silent. But something about the way she clutched that coat told him she hadn't given up entirely. Later that night she stirred faintly. Her head turned. Her eyes met his for a heartbeat. No words, no emotion, just a spark of connection. A flicker of something human buried deep beneath the pain. He nodded like a man who had been in trenches before and knew when not to speak. And she turned her head back to the wall. The next morning she whispered her first word, water. He handed her a cup. Slow and careful. No sudden moves. She drank quietly, then held his gaze a little longer than before. And that look, it didn't beg for help. It didn't thank him. It only said one thing. I'm still here. What Nathan didn't yet know was this, that single word, that one sip of water would ignite a chain of events that no fire, no shotgun, and no silence could ever stop. She didn't speak much the following day, just short replies, nods, a few guarded glances, as if she was still deciding if he was real or just another trick of a cruel world. But later that afternoon, while he was whittling down a broken chair leg out on the porch, she stepped outside and sat on the steps beside him. Didn't say anything at first, just stared off into the trees. Then, almost like speaking to herself, she said it. They used to make me clean their boots. Nathan kept carving. Didn't flinch. Just nodded. Slow, Amelia continued. Said there was a mining camp not far away. Not official. Not on any map. a place where people were worked to the bone and punished when they faltered. She had run twice. The first time, they broke her nose. The second, they carved her back like rawhide. He didn't ask how she escaped the third time. He figured that was a tale for a stronger day. But just as the sun started to sink behind the pines, Nathan heard something that stopped him cold. Hoofbeats fast coming up the ridge road. He rose, grabbed his shotgun, signaled Amelia inside. She froze, then moved like someone who had been trained for moments, exactly like this. The man who rode up didn't look like a cowboy. He looked like a drunk banker who lost his watch and blamed the waitress. Fancy vest, greasy mustache that couldn't hide the cruelty underneath. He called her by name. "Amelia Ward, you've got one chance to come back quietly." Nathan stepped down off the porch. "She's not going anywhere." The man smirked. "Ain't up to you, old man." Nathan cocked the shotgun. Not aimed. Just enough to remind the man this wasn't some city street. This was his land. The man didn't draw. Just spat into the dirt, turned his horse and rode off. But the look in his eyes as he left said one thing clear. He'd return. And he wouldn't be alone. Nathan stayed silent for a long while after. Just sat there, shotgun across his lap, staring into the trees. Later that night, he scribbled a note to an old friend who carried a badge, just in case. If you're still listening to this, I'd say you're like Nathan. You want to know what comes next. And believe me, you'll want to be here for it. So if you haven't yet, now's the right time to hit that subscribe button, because the real fight hasn't even started. 3 days passed, quiet ones, but the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. The kind where even the wind feels like it's waiting. Nathan stayed close. He didn't say it, but Amelia knew he was keeping watch. He didn't cut wood, didn't check traps, just cleaned that shotgun like it was Sunday morning, and the world was about to collapse. Then it came. Late afternoon, the air went still. No birds, no insects, just the sound of hooves and dust rising on the ridge road. 3 riders. Not ranchers, not lawmen. They rode like they didn't need permission. Nathan stood in the doorway, Amelia behind him, holding her breath. One of the men was the same who had come days earlier. This time he wasn't here to talk. He shouted, "Step aside, old man." Nathan didn't. The second rider shifted in his saddle, hand creeping too close to his belt. Nathan didn't wait, he fired. The man yelped, dropped like a sack of grain, leg pouring blood. The other 2 froze. Didn't flee, but didn't move either. That's when another voice spoke, calm, steady, worn like leather. "I'd think real hard about your next move." From the tree line, a man stepped out, badge on his chest, rifle hanging low. Victor Grayson, Nathan's old war brother. Now sheriff of the whole territory. Victor locked eyes with each of them. "This is my jurisdiction, and she's under my protection now." The wounded one groaned, his partner cursed, but none of them reached for their guns again. They left slow, but they left. Later, Nathan asked Victor how he knew to come. Victor smirked. "You send a note that smells like gunpowder and regret. I figure it's serious, and if you think that was the last time these men would cross paths, you'd better stick around, because some stories don't end in gunfire." They just begin there. The dust settled. The cabin was silent again, but not the same silence as before. Not heavy, not haunted, just quiet in a way that let a man hear his own breath and not despise it. Amelia no longer hid. She still flinched at loud noises, still woke drenched in sweat some nights. But now she sat at the table in the morning. She drank her coffee slow. She helped gather firewood, asked questions about the stove. Little things. And little things matter when you've returned from the edge, Nathan noticed too. The way she looked out the window a little longer each day. The way she once laughed, a breathless sound, but it was there. And how he didn't know what to do with it. He wasn't sure if he was repairing her or she was repairing him. Maybe it didn't matter. One evening she brought in a basket of wildflowers and set them by the window. He didn't say a word, but the next day he swept the porch clean for the first time in years. They didn't talk about love, didn't name it anything at all. But one night, over stew and black coffee, she asked, "Do you ever think some people were put here not to save others, but to give them space to save themselves?" Nathan didn't answer, only nodded. Because if he had opened his mouth, the wrong words might have spilled out. And that's how it went. Two souls, a cabin, a slow healing that didn't need permission or explanation. But here's the truth. How many like Amelia are still out there right now? How many Nathans sit alone thinking their story is finished? Sometimes all it takes is one decision, one act of kindness, one moment of not turning away. So let me ask you something. Who are you in this story? Are you the one running, or the one who stays still and opens the door? If this story touched you, give it a like. Maybe share it. Let it stay with you a while. And if you want to hear more stories like this, raw, real, the kind that linger, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Because out here in the West, stories don't end. They just keep writing.